So I'd like to welcome everyone today and thank you for taking the time to join us. This is Certes Networks, and our discussion this afternoon will be how observability can provide the visual proof that your security strategy is working. So I'm Ann Chesbrough, the Global Marketing Director for Certes Networks, and I will be your moderator and take part in the discussion today. So during the next 30 minutes, we will be discussing what observability is and what it isn't, why it's important and how to achieve it. We'll talk about the differences between visibility and observability and hopefully leave you with some good information that will shed some light on observability and how to implement it in your company. So before we get started, I'd like to introduce our key speaker and panelist, Sean Everson. Sean is our Chief Technology Officer at Certes Networks and has been with us for about 9 years. As far as CTOs, I must say that Sean brings 20 years of passion and experience to help keep Certes Networks on the forefront of cybersecurity. He's laughing here, but it's the truth. I have a great appreciation for Sean, and his collaboration with marketing has been invaluable. Just a little background on who's joining us today as far as listeners. We have over 11 countries on the line from Europe, the Middle East, and North America, and listeners across many industries, including finance, healthcare, oil and gas, manufacturing, and all levels of government. So as we start a discussion today, please feel free to send us questions via chat. We'll try to take them during the discussion. That's not a problem, but we will try to cover most of them at the end of the session during our Q&A. So with that, I will turn it over to Sean.
So thanks, Ann, and a big welcome to everyone who's on the line today. I am very pleased to take part in this discussion today and want to thank you guys for joining us. I'd like to start off by mentioning that to date, observability has really been focused on cloud-based applications. Observability, though, does apply to more than just the cloud and can include networks and IT in general. A lot of Certes customers ask us about observability, but are not finding enough information available online about observability and how it works for the network. So today we will be spending a little bit of time focusing on network observability as well as systems and cloud observability. So let's begin with the origins of observability. Where did it all start? So observability has really started with network and systems monitoring. Back in the 60s and 70s, even with mainframes such as the IBM 360, monitoring was possible. It was really nothing more than shooting would have just been dumping out the contents of memory. When Unix came around, we at least had terminals with logs printed out to them and tools such as SAR and NetStat. For the network monitoring as we know it today really started with SNMP in 1988. This was the first modern telemetry system for the network. The whole industry around monitoring for the network and for systems and applications really popped up and gave us a lot of the tools that we use today. Observability, however, is really an idea that comes out of the cloud companies, the big cloud providers, and companies such as Facebook and Netflix. These types of cloud companies quickly ran into challenges trying to use the existing monitoring tools at scale for their massive cloud applications. They needed to invent new tools and techniques for addressing their unique challenges, especially when attempting to troubleshoot and diagnose problems in distributed systems, their large networks, and cloud applications. They had to move beyond simple metrics and logging into the more advanced concept of observability that we're going to talk more about today. So let's take a look at what observability is and what it is not. Before we get started, I'd like each of you to take a moment just to think about how you currently define observability and what it means for your company. Is it better monitoring tools? Is it data that you can act upon? What is it for you that can impact your security strategy? So observability and visibility, what is the difference? Visibility is often, terms are often used interchangeably, but they are not really the same thing. Visibility and monitoring do have an important role to play, But what I will say is that observability builds on visibility, but visibility is not the same thing as observability. Visibility is focused more on just the metrics and monitoring, while observability is really making sure that you can gain deeper insights and understanding from the data you're collecting from your networks or systems. Observability builds on top of visibility to provide much richer context and understanding about the system. So let's get back a little bit to the question that everyone is asking. What is observability? Observability is very much like a feedback loop. Let me give you an example. Let's think about a car's exhaust. If you see black smoke coming out of the exhaust, what do you think? Is the engine healthy or not healthy? Observability, as formally defined in system control theory, is a measure of how well something is working internally, concluded from what occurs externally. The car's exhaust is a good example of this. If you can see black smoke coming out of the tailpipe, then you can make a judgment that the engine is probably not healthy. Observability is building our applications and systems with the idea that someone is going to be watching or observing them, much like we did the car's exhaust. Why do we want to observe our systems? Because we want to be able to detect problems such as, oil burning in our engine, to support better troubleshooting, to make enhancements and improvements to our systems. So let's think about the car's exhaust in a little more detail again. If we think of the data that we're looking to observe as the smoke and the oil, that data is providing us with context and metadata. This is happening externally to the system. This contextual data is the raw events and raw data, much like flows on the network that we can look at to get a good sense of what's going on in the network. This data really helps to add context and really helps the operator make a judgment. Is the data good or bad? Is the smoke a sign that the engine is healthy or not healthy? Let's explore this a little bit further. So I'm going to go through a simple exercise just to kind of highlight some of the differences between visibility and observability. Visibility is going to tell you whether your system is working. It's providing information about how the system is performing. Observability is going to let you ask why it's not working. It can support debugging even in unexpected situations. Visibility is a collection of metrics and logs about your system or your network. Observability is the data and the extra context needed to support exploration and gaining deeper insights into the problems you're experiencing or your system or network. Visibility and monitoring is something that you do to the system. Observability is a property of the network or system itself. It's more something that the system has than something that you do. And finally, visibility is I monitor the network, whereas observability is the network is observable.
So Sean, to clarify, if I understand this correctly, visibility is only as good as the metrics that you've predefined, and you may not know what the problem is, so you're limited. Whereas with observability, you have made the whole state of the network observable. Therefore, you're no longer limited. And when a problem occurs, you have all the context available to troubleshoot the incident. Would that be right?
That's correct. Here's another simple example we can look at. If we have a web page that is taking too long to load and users are getting a timeout message, if the web server is collecting predefined metrics on how much time it takes for each page to load, so how can we use this metric, how much time it takes for pages to load, to do troubleshooting when we're seeing these timeout messages? The reality is you can't. This metric, or an example of a metric, will alert you to the existence of a problem, but without a lot of additional context, you're going to have a hard time troubleshooting. Now let's take another look at the same problem, but from the example of troubleshooting after you've made your web server observable. Once your web server is observable, you would have rich data at your fingertips, maybe the different sizes of the elements of the page, logs of any additional call-outs to third-party servers, network data from the time of the incident, server CPU statistics. And this type of extra data will really provide you with rich, detailed context about the event that you can use to troubleshoot. If you have not made your system observable up front, none of this data would be available to you when the problem occurs, and you'd have a hard time exploring the context to troubleshoot. So now that we've talked a little bit about what observability is, let's talk about why it's important. As you have seen, observability enhances the operator's ability to troubleshoot and make informed network decisions. It allows you to explore problems as they're happening, so you're not trying to troubleshoot long after a problem happened with just a couple of basic metrics. It allows you to analyze data in context to gain new and deeper insights. It allows you to proactively make data-informed decisions to improve performance or security of your network or system. And lastly, it will allow you to strengthen your security posture, block threats, and prevent attacks by defining policies based on the insights that you gain. So now that we understand a little bit more about observability and why it's so important, let's start to discuss how to achieve it. Achieving observability is based around 4 basic steps. The first step is to watch or observe. This means that you really need to instrument your network or system to collect data and metrics that you can later use. In order to instrument your network, you need to deploy tools and solutions that can capture raw flows, logs, and metrics from around your network or your system. If it's an application or a system that you want to observe, you may need to write code to capture raw events that occur in your system and explain, the context that these events need in order for you to understand them. Once you have all of this data and information, you're going to need to take it and funnel it to your analytics engine in order to support and really provide observability. The goal here is to expand the operator's ability to see and explore the data, which takes us to our next step, to analyze. We do have to remember when we analyze that it's basically garbage in, garbage out. You have to have these good sources of data that are relevant to your system in order to feed your analytics engine. Once you have your data, you're able to analyze it, and you need a good tool, a rich analytics tool that supports exploration of data. This tool should provide you with dashboards and good visualization tools that can assist you in exploring your data. Lastly, you want to make sure that you're capturing context along with the raw data, such as the metrics or the logs, as that is really key to enhancing the understanding of your network or system. Once we've completed our analysis, the next step is to decide what to do with the results. It is here that the operator can observe what is occurring within their network or system based on data insights. The operator is able to resolve problems or look for ways to improve the system. The operator is able to determine whether new policies or controls are needed and can be used to improve security. Perhaps more capacity is required to meet the growing demand of your system or application. These new insights gained will help to enhance your company's systems or improve your security posture. And the last step to achieving observability is to act. We can now move forward and create and deploy policies throughout our network. We can create fine-grained policies to segment our network and protect against unauthorized access. For our web server example, we may deploy additional network or server resources to address the bottleneck that was causing load issues that our customers were seeing.
Okay, so now that we've talked about where observability started, what it is, why it's important, how to achieve it, for our listeners, think about how you would take advantage of observability based on this. How would you go about achieving observability in your company? And this leads us to observability as a culture. Sean and I have talked a little bit about this, and it's interesting because observability as a culture seems to be the new buzz phrase. We see it in the media, we see it online, but I think it's important that we truly understand how to implement it. You know, observability as a culture, we think at Certes, should be far more important than something you just say. It should be something that you actually act upon.
That's very true, Ann. It's putting observability into action at your company that's really going to make it beneficial. And that isn't easy if its importance is not widely understood. At Certes, we believe it is more than just words. We have defined it as the measure by which your company and team values the ability to understand your networks or systems. I wonder if most of us understand if, number one, our own company understands observability and what it can do, and number two, the value that observability can bring to the network or to the company. As data protection becomes more and more mission critical, we are seeing more companies moving towards observability as a culture, because visibility and monitoring is not enough, and observability is not really optional any longer. One example of a company that understands observability very well is Netflix. At Netflix, they've invested a lot into observability, and this has led to a double-digit percentage of their overall budget going into observability systems and tooling. And the main reason for this is exactly what we have discussed here today. They really want to gain deeper insights into how their applications are performing, the behavior of those applications, and make sure that their users have a very rich and rewarding experience. So, to summarize, let's walk through the 4 steps of achieving observability and how these steps can help you implement it. First, you have to watch by collecting all of the data and context that you can from your network, from your systems. Then you analyze this data to gain new and deeper insights. Then you have to decide what to do with these insights, what steps or actions you may need to take. And finally, you act, improving your systems, creating new policies, potentially improving security.
You know, having participated in many customer meetings, in fact, I just got off one earlier this afternoon, I can honestly say that at Certes, we've created a best practice around observability. We don't set up observability one time, but have implemented this process every day for ourselves. And that certainly goes a long way with our customers. This is not only how we emphasize observability, but how we practice observability as a culture within our organization. So customers can then begin to understand how observability works and the value that it brings to them. So next, I think the question that we're asking, and we'd like to ask all of you listening on the line, is do you see observability differently now? How can observability really make a difference in your company? So Sean, I have one last question for you, and I think it's an important one. You have been in the technology industry now for 20 years. You've served in many roles, and as our Chief Technology Officer here at Certes for 9 years. What is the future of observability, and what do you think? Is it a passing phase, or is it here to stay?
Well, Ann, I believe that it is definitely here to stay. I am seeing a rapid evolution of tools and techniques around observability that will continue to grow and grow very quickly. The observability market for these sorts of tools is expected to grow from roughly $4 billion in 2017 to $8.7 billion in 2023. Along the way, I think we'll continue to see better tools emerge. Already we've seen databases like InfluxDB, MetricsDB. These are tools that support better storage and cross-indexing of metrics and events. Other tools, such as Elasticstack, allow for the mixing of logs, traces, and metrics into a single database, and also provide you with rich analytic tools that you can use to explore that data. We have to remember, though, that observability is a battle won or lost before you start sticking tools on top of the system. While monitoring tools can definitely contribute to innovation in instrumentation, analysis, and visualization, in large part, observability is a battle won or lost before you start sticking tools on top of the system. It is very important that we take it into account when designing and implementing our networks, our services, and our systems. No single tool is going to give you observability. That's pretty much a myth. that people, peddling particular tools want you to believe. So we have to understand that the value observability can bring if we truly want to embrace observability as a culture in our companies.
All right. So thank you, Sean. That concludes our discussion. Rather brief, but certainly I think a lot of information there for our listeners. So we're now going to take a few questions from our listeners, so feel free to send them via chat if you haven't already. Okay, so Sean, we have a question that's come in from one of our listeners, and basically they feel that the monitoring tools that they have in place are sufficient. How would they go about, talking to their management about bringing aboard observability as a tool?
Well, I think the important thing is to make sure that from the tools that they already have, that they're getting enough context to really understand their systems. Most monitoring or tools that are available today, they focus on metrics, which can be very helpful, but without the context that is specific to your application, your system, or your network, you're not going to get the full value like you would once you've moved to observability as a culture.
Okay. Next question is that, again, they're talking to a particular vendor at this point. They think that they're getting observability, but after the presentation, this particular listener is saying, I'm not sure if I have visibility or, if I have observability. What questions should he or she ask that particular vendor?
Well, the important thing there is in addition to, what metrics the tool might be creating or collecting, is to really look at the analytics side, really make sure the context around the metrics and contextual metadata that you can use to really understand the system and explore, problems when they occur. Without that context and that additional insight, you're not going to get a lot of value necessarily.
Great. Another question coming in, and although we've talked about the 4 steps, the question is, what are the components for implementation?
Well, if we were, I'll use the example of a network. If we are instrumenting a network to make it more observable, you're going to want to look around and see what kind of systems you already have in place. Maybe you have switches, routers, encryptors, devices like that can be used to collect metrics, collect network flows, and help you to provide, context about the network. Then what you'd have to do is use a technology such as NetFlow or IPFix to then funnel that information to your analytics tool. Then from the analytics tool, you should be able to, aggregate and browse and visualize that data so that you can really get meaningful insights about what's happening on your network.
Okay, great. Another question coming in. What are some of the good observability engines that are out there? And the second half of the question is, then how do I integrate that into my existing network system or network?
That's a very good question. So at Certes, we actually make use of analytics stack. It's called Elk Stack. It's actually an open source package, but it is, I think, a good example of a system that can be used to deliver on the promise of observability. They have a couple of different components. So they have a component called Logstash, which can ingest network flows. It can ingest logs. It can ingest metrics. They then have their own database engine called Elasticsearch that can then compile all of this information and serve it up to their analytics system called Kibana that allows you to, graphically visualize the metrics, analyze the metrics, look through logs and whatnot. That's the one I'm most familiar with. There are other commercial packages out there, but I think that would be a great place to start if someone's investigating.
Great, great. Next question that we have coming in. So If it's, an open platform, this person is saying, what is going to keep me from just purchasing, an observability software versus some vendor who is selling observability? What are the differences there?
Yeah, I think the important point is a vendor can't really sell observability about your system. They can provide you tools that will help you make your system observable, but the vendor is not going to understand, the context of your application of your network. They just don't have that domain knowledge, if that makes sense. So really, they can provide you a tool that will help you achieve observability or make your system observable, but they can't really do it for you or through the purchase of that tool.
Great. I'm going to take a couple more questions here. The next question is, you talked earlier about observability available for the network versus cloud or in general. Can you expand upon the difference between those a little bit more?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So, for a cloud application, for somebody like Netflix, they're using observability. They're instrumenting their cloud system to collect things like, load times for videos, latency, jitter, things like that, drop packets, things that are relevant to their system. In a network environment, which is something at Certes we're more familiar with, is, you're going to be looking more for flows, how well those flows are performing. Is this traffic related to, say, your critical database applications, maybe your ERP system, an accounting package, or whatever is, crucial for your business. And it's that context or being able to link that data and those flows to your own applications that really provides the context and the benefits of observability. So the cloud guys are more focused on application metrics, specific to their applications, where in network and especially in the security area, we're more focused on, maybe are these flows healthy flows for the database server, or is this a sign that these flows are a sign that the database server's been hacked? Something along those lines.
Okay. Then I'm going to take this last question, and forgive me if it's a bit promotional, but it is an actual question. This particular listener said that he received a email from Certes on observability and wants to understand, what is Certes Observability versus the fact that you've just talked about open platforms that are available for observability.
Sure. So the real benefit that an observability solution from Certes would provide is that we've done a lot of the work around our solutions to make our solution observable, right? So when you deploy a Certes solution into the network, it's going to provide a set of metadata that is unique to Certes that can help you as part of your overall observability program. It's not going to deliver observability to you in a single shot, but as part of your overall observability program, it can really help. And we've implemented some of the things that we've talked about here in our system to help make some of these things more visual, more graphical, and provide some of the context that you need, to troubleshoot or investigate problems. So we've kind of done some of the groundwork, if you will, and then you can take that and build upon it to really create your own solution for your context or for your application.
Terrific. So we give you more context. We've done a lot of the legwork.
We've done a good bit of legwork, and then you can take that and build upon it, because our observability solution is actually an open solution.
Okay. Wonderful. Yeah, wonderful. All right. So that kind of concludes the webinar for today. Again, I want to thank everybody for joining us. We will be hosting another webinar in November. I hope that you will join us. That will be featuring our President and CEO, and we will be talking about cybersecurity in 2020. Certainly, if you want to learn more about observability in Certes, you can go to our website at certesnetworks.com, or to learn more about our products, you can certainly email us at the email that you see on your screen. Couple things, you can download the presentation, the webinar, that's available right there on the Bright Talk channel. We also have an observability overview that you might find interesting, And we also have a use case, which is a public utilities company and how they used observability successfully. So we want to thank you all for joining us today, and do not hesitate to reach out to us should you have any other questions, and we look forward to hopefully seeing all of you again in November. So thank you.